Once upon a time, my house was full of life. Now it was too big for a lonely old man. 5 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a spacious living room with a fireplace, a kitchen where Esther cooked her specialties, and a dining room where we gathered as a family. Now I move around the house like a ghost, listening to the creak of the floorboards and the ticking of the antique clock I inherited from my father. My name is Griffin Windley. I'm 77 years old and I've been living alone in the town of Bowers for 3 years now. 3 years since Esther left. Cancer took her quickly, 6 months from diagnosis to funeral. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night, reach over to her side of the bed and wonder why it's empty. We lived together for 49 years, only 1 year short of our golden wedding anniversary. Esther loved to plan. She was already figuring out how we would celebrate 50 years of marriage. "Griff," she said, using a nickname she'd given me back in college, "we'll rent a small restaurant and gather everyone we care about." She dreamed of a champagne-colored dress and a new suit for me. It's all left in a folder labeled Golden Wedding that I can't bring myself to throw away. The morning starts with a cup of coffee and the newspaper, a habit I can't get rid of, even though all the news is now online. Lenora, my daughter, keeps telling me I should buy a tablet or at least a smartphone like normal people. I have a phone, an old fold-out that does the job of making calls just fine. I don't need food photos or selfies. As for news, the newspaper and TV do just fine. Today's coffee is a little bitter. I make it in an old Turk that Esther and I brought back from a trip to Turkey. It was our 25th anniversary. We were both still working. Lenora was 23 and just out of college. We were still happy all together then. I finish my coffee and go to the backyard to check on my tomatoes. Gardening is a hobby I discovered after I retired. Esther laughed at my hobby, but enjoyed making salads from the vegetables I grew. She said she had never seen a person so reverent about tomatoes. The house across the street belongs to Sylvia Parks, a widow who moved to Bowers about 5 years ago. She must be a little over 60, but I don't know exactly. Never asked. We started communicating after Esther died. At first, she just brought casseroles and pies, neighborhood support. Then we started exchanging books. Sylvia is into detectives. I prefer historical fiction. We often joke that our exchange is cultural enrichment. "Good morning, Griffin." I hear her voice through the hedges. "How are the tomatoes doing today?" "Growing," I answer, turning around. Sylvia is standing in her yard with a watering can in her hands. She's wearing a wide-brimmed straw hat and a brightly colored dress. "If this keeps up, we'll have our first harvest at the end of the week. Don't forget to share," she smiles. "I just found a great recipe for tomato soup." "I will," I nod. Sylvia is easy. She doesn't demand constant attention, doesn't judge my old-fashioned habits, doesn't hint at my condition. Money. They've always been a tool for me, not a goal. I've worked as a financial analyst for a large company for 42 years. I started as a simple clerk in the era of paper reports and counting machines and ended up as a senior analyst when everything was already automated. I have seen the financial world change. The stock market bubbles rise and burst. People lose fortunes and build them up. Esther and I always lived within our means, but we did not deny ourselves small pleasures. She taught elementary school, loved her job, and loved children. We both retired the same year. I was 65, she was 63. By then we had substantial savings, retirement accounts, investments in stocks and bonds. This house fully paid off a decade earlier. We planned to travel. Esther made a list of places she wanted to visit: Venice, Prague, Kyoto, Buenos Aires. We only made it to Venice. Then her headache started. The phone rings, pulling me out of my memories. It's Lenora. She calls once a week, usually on Sunday. Today is Wednesday, and that's unusual. "Hi, Dad." Her voice sounds a little too cheerful. I'm immediately alarmed. "How are you?" "I'm fine," I answer. "Did something happen?" "Why does something have to happen?" She immediately goes on the defensive. "Can't a daughter just call her father?" "Maybe, I think. But you only call when you need something. I don't say that out loud, though. Of course she can. It's just that you usually call on Sundays. I thought maybe you'd like to come over for dinner Friday night. Lloyd's cooking steaks. You love the way he does it. Lloyd, Lenora's husband, is really good at steak. That's probably the only thing I appreciate about him. He works as an insurance adjuster, wears suits that are a little tight, and he's always talking about money. My money, to be exact. Sure, I agree. What time? 7 o'clock. And, Dad, she pauses. Could you stop by that liquor store downtown? Lloyd said they have a great red wine that goes well with steaks. He'll write down the name and text you. Here it is. There's always some kind of request. A bottle of wine won't bankrupt me, but it's the principle of the matter. Okay, I say. Anything else? No, that's it. See you Friday, Dad. She hangs up without even waiting for me to say goodbye. Typical Lenora. Always in a hurry. Always busy with something more important than talking to her father. Lenora is our only child. Esther had a difficult birth, and the doctors said we couldn't have any more children. We put all our love and care into our daughter. Maybe too much. Esther couldn't say no to her, and I didn't want to be the bad cop. As a result, Lenora grew up with the belief that the world should revolve around her. She met Lloyd in college. He studied business, she studied psychology. Both didn't finish. Lenora got pregnant in her 3rd year and they got married. I offered to pay for their housing and a nanny so they could finish their studies, but Lloyd insisted he had to provide for his family on his own. A noble gesture that lasted exactly until the birth of their firstborn, Beckett. After that, they started coming to us regularly for help. They now have 2 children. Beckett is 16 and Fiona is 14. They live in a house, the down payment for which I paid as a wedding gift. It's not small, 4 bedrooms, 2 stories, but Lloyd is always looking at the neighbor's housing and thinks he deserves more. My phone rings again. This time, it's Beckett. Hi, Grandpa. His voice breaks between a childlike and adult tone. How are you doing? Good, I say, already guessing where the conversation is going. How are you? I'm fine. Listen, Grandpa, you remember that my birthday is coming up, right? Of course I remember. July 17th. I've already bought him a present, the new bicycle he talked about a few months ago. Esther was always in the gift-giving business, and since she died, I've been more attentive to what the grandchildren have to say. Yeah, I remember. You're going to be 17. I am. And you know, me and my friends wanted to go to a concert in a neighboring town. The tickets aren't very expensive, but we need money for a bus and maybe a hotel. I sigh. Beckett, do your parents know about your plans? Yes, he answers a little too quickly. I told them. My mom said to ask you. Of course she said that. Lenora prefers me to be the ATM and her to be the good parent. She never says no to the kids herself, just sends them to me. I'll think about it, I say. Let's discuss it on Friday at dinner. You're coming? There's genuine surprise in his voice. Didn't Lenora tell the kids she invited me? Cool. See you Friday then, Grandpa. After talking to my grandson, I decide to take a walk to the store. Bowers is a small town and it's a 20-minute walk to the center. The doctor says it's good to walk at my age. My knees sometimes protest, but on the whole I am still quite strong for my age. On the way, I meet Todd Gibbs, whom I've known since I was working. He moved to Bowers around the same time Esther and I did. We all wanted the peace of a small town after decades in the metropolis. Griffin, Todd waves his cane at me. He had hip surgery last year and still can't walk without support. It's been a long time. Hello, Todd. I stop. How's your health? Creaky, but hanging in there, he grins. How are you doing? Family's not bothering you? Todd is one of the few people who knows about my problems with Lenora and Lloyd. We meet occasionally at a local cafe for coffee and to complain about life. His children live in other cities and rarely visit their father. He says he envies me. At least my daughter lives nearby. I'm not sure that's an advantage. Lenora invited me to dinner on Friday, I reply. I wouldn't be surprised if they insinuate that they need money again. Don't give it to them, Todd says simply. You're the one who earned the money, so it's up to you what you spend it on. The problem is, for me, money stopped being a goal a long time ago. After Esther died, I realized I couldn't take it with me to the grave. Who should I leave them to, if not my only daughter and grandchildren? On the other hand, I don't want them to think of me as a walking ATM machine. We'll see, I say. How are your grandchildren doing? We talk a little more about families and health, then say goodbye. I continue on my way to the store, thinking about the upcoming dinner. Something tells me that Lenora invited me over for a reason. Back home, I see Sylvia pruning the roses in her garden. She notices me and waves me over. Would you like to come in for tea? She asks. I've baked a blueberry pie. Sylvia is a good woman. She lost her husband a year before I lost Esther. We understand each other's pain without words. Sometimes I feel like she's the only person who really cares about me, not my money. It would be my pleasure, I reply and head towards her house. Over tea and cake, we talk about books, about gardening, about the latest city news. Sylvia used to work as an editor for a publishing house and still does freelance work. She is intelligent and an interesting conversationalist. Lenora invited me to dinner, I say when the conversation naturally turns to family. Oh, Sylvia raises her eyebrows. And what do you think? I don't know. On the one hand, she's my daughter, and I want to see her and the grandchildren. On the other, I don't finish the sentence. On the other hand, you feel like they're only interested in your wallet, Sylvia finishes for me. Griffin, you're too kind to them. After everything they've done, she means Esther's funeral. Lenora insisted on a modest ceremony, saying that Mother wouldn't want any excesses. In fact, Esther wanted her funeral to be a light farewell with music, flowers, and memories. We talked about it, but Lenora wouldn't listen to me, and then, when it was over, she was the first to bring up the inheritance. They're my family, I say, though I'm not sure that's an excuse. Family is supposed to support each other, Sylvia says softly, not take advantage of them. I know she's right. But to admit it is to admit that almost 50 years of parenting have gone to waste, that my only daughter has grown up selfish, caring only for herself, that it's probably my own fault for letting her have it all from a young age. We'll see what happens on Friday, I say, changing the subject. This pie is absolutely marvelous, Sylvia. She smiles, accepting my departure from the difficult subject. We spend another hour in pleasant conversation. Then I thank her for her hospitality and head home. I spend the evening leafing through old photo albums. Here is Lenora as a child, a smiling girl with pigtails, so much like Esther. Here's her high school graduation. Here's her wedding. Here we are all together on the ocean, our last vacation before Esther's illness. We look happy. When did things change? When did my daughter start looking at me as a source of money instead of a father? Maybe Friday will be different, I think, as I close the album. Maybe Lenora just wants to spend time with me, with no ulterior motive. I want to believe that, even though experience suggests otherwise. I go to bed thinking about the upcoming dinner and what Sylvia said. Perhaps it's time to stop being an ATM and start just being a father and grandfather. If, of course, Lenora would let me do that. Friday night dinner at Lenora's went exactly as I had envisioned. Lloyd cooked steaks, which I'll admit were really good. The red wine I brought was also appreciated. Beckett started talking about going to the concert again, and Lenora looked at me as if the matter had been settled. How much do you need? I asked, feeling like a bank clerk instead of a grandfather. $300 should be enough, Beckett answered quickly, as if he was afraid I'd change my mind. I pulled out my wallet and counted out the money. Lenora didn't even seem to mind that it was too much. She just smiled and continued eating. Fiona, my granddaughter, was engrossed in her phone all evening. She only looked up when she saw me pull out my wallet. "Grandpa," she said in a sweet voice, "I need new headphones to study. Mine are broken." Again, no interference from my parents. I gave her the money, feeling increasingly uncomfortable. After dessert, a store-bought cake that didn't compare to Sylvia's baked goods, Lloyd started talking about profitable real estate investments. He talked about the rising prices of houses in the suburbs and the importance of investing in your family's future. I listened half-heartedly, watching Lenora. She looked at her husband with such admiration, as if he were a financial genius, not an insurance appraiser who hadn't been promoted in 15 years. "Griffin," Lloyd never called me dad or father even when talking to Lenora, "with your background in finance, you should know what I'm talking about. Money should be working, not lying around dead." "My money works," I replied. "It is invested in stable funds and brings a stable income." "But real estate gives a much higher return," Lloyd almost shouted, "especially now that the market is booming." I understood what he was getting at. They wanted me to invest in a house, which, of course, would be in their name. After all, I'm too old to do that sort of thing. "I'll think about it," I said, using my standard phrase for such occasions. Lenora threw her husband a warning glance, and he changed the subject. The rest of the evening passed in conversation about the grandchildren's school, Lloyd's job, and the new neighbors who had moved into their street. No one asked how I was feeling. No one asked what I did in my spare time. To them, I was just a purse on legs, a cash cow that needed to be milked periodically. This became even more obvious in the following weeks. Lenora called me more often than usual, but the conversation always centered on money. She needed to pay for Fiona's dentist. She wants braces so she can look like everyone else in her class. She needed a new air conditioner for the house. The old one broke, and you can't go without it in the summer. Or there was some unforeseen expense. I did not refuse. Partly out of habit, partly out of fear that if I stopped giving money, I would lose the last link to my family. Esther would not have approved of such behavior, but Esther is gone, and I have to make my own decisions. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, I was sitting in Martha's Cafe, a small establishment in downtown Bowers known for its pies and casual atmosphere. I often stopped in here for coffee and to read the paper. Doris, the waitress, knew my order by heart: black coffee and a slice of apple pie. "Griffin," I heard a familiar voice and looked up from the paper. Todd Gibbs was heading toward my table, leaning on his cane. "Would you like some company?" "I'd be glad to," I replied sincerely. Todd ordered coffee and sat down across from me. We exchanged news. Nothing much had happened in the 2 weeks we hadn't seen each other. He told me about his new hobby, wood carving, and showed me pictures of the figurines he'd made. "What about your family?" he finally asked. "Had you heard from Lenora?" I sighed and told him about the latest demands of my daughter and son-in-law. "And you gave them money again?" It wasn't a question, but a statement. Todd shook his head. "Griffin, you're not doing them a favor. You're encouraging their behavior." "But they're my family," I objected weakly. "Who else am I supposed to be helping?" "Family isn't just blood," Todd said. "It's also about respect and caring for each other. When was the last time Lenora asked about your health? When did your grandchildren visit you for no reason other than money?" I got to thinking. Beckett had stopped by my house in April, but only to ask for money for a new bicycle. Fiona hadn't been to my house since Christmas, and even then she'd spent the whole evening on the phone. Lenora dropped by a couple of times, but always with some kind of request. "You know," Todd continued, seeing my silence, "my kids live far away, but they call every week. Not to ask for money, but to see how I'm doing. My son flew in from Seattle when I had hip surgery. That's family." "I wasn't so lucky," I admitted. "It's not about luck." Todd leaned across the table toward me. "It's about boundaries. You let them use you. You've become an ATM machine for them instead of a father and grandfather." His words hit me harder than I expected, maybe because deep down I knew he was right. So what do you suggest? I asked. Refuse to help them? I suggest you stop being an ATM and start being a father, Todd replied. Don't just give them money. Offer help in other forms. Spend time with your grandchildren. Show them you're more than a wallet on legs. We talked for another hour or so. Todd shared how he had built a relationship with his daughter after a period of estrangement, how important it was to set boundaries and stick to them, how hard it was to say no, but how it changed their relationship for the better. I left the cafe with heavy thoughts. Todd was right, but I wasn't sure I had the courage to change the established order of things. The next day, Beckett came to my house. No warning, just rang the doorbell after school. "Hi, Grandpa," he smiled, but his eyes gave away his real purpose for the visit. "Hello, Beckett," I let him in. "Would you like some tea? Or there's cola in the fridge." "Coke will be fine." He made his way to the kitchen, knowing where everything was, even though he was rarely here. I took a can of Coke out of the fridge and handed it to him. Beckett opened it and took a big gulp. "Grandpa," he began without preamble, "I need your help. My friends and I want to rent a lake house for the weekend. Nothing fancy, just a vacation before the school year starts." "Do your parents know about this?" I asked. "Of course," he answered too quickly. "My mom said that if you pay for it, I can go. It's the same thing again. Lenora is shifting the responsibility to me so that she can remain a good mom herself." "How much will it cost?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "About $500, Beckett said. That's for 4 people, for 2 days. I thought about what Todd had said, about boundaries and being a father, not an ATM machine." "Beckett," I said slowly, "I won't give you money for nothing, but I can offer you a deal." His face stretched. "What kind of deal?" "You'll help me with the garden. I've got a lot of work piled up and my back's not right anymore." "If you work this weekend, I'll pay for your trip." "But I have plans this weekend," Beckett was indignant. "Then you'll have to postpone the trip to the lake," I replied calmly. He looked at me in surprise, as if I were speaking a foreign language. I'd never made conditions before. "Yep, I'll ask my friends if I can reschedule," he said finally. "And I'll come back to you." He never came back. Instead, Lenora called, her voice literally shaking with indignation. "What is this news?" She began without greeting. "Beckett says you're making him work for money?" "I offered him a fair deal," I replied. "I help him. He helps me." "He's your grandson," Lenore exclaimed. "You must help him unconditionally." "And he should respect his grandfather," I parried, "and learn that money doesn't fall from the sky." "I can't believe it." Her voice turned cold. "You're changing, Dad, and not for the better." "Maybe I'm just ceasing to be an ATM," I said, using Todd's expression. Lenora was silent for a few seconds. "You're going to regret this," she finally said. "Beckett just wanted to spend time with his friends, and you ruined it." She hung up without waiting for me to answer. I stood with the phone in my hand, feeling a strange mixture of guilt and relief. On the one hand, I had upset my grandson and daughter. On the other, for the first time in a long time, I hadn't let them manipulate me. That evening I told Sylvia about it as we sat on her veranda watching the sunset. "You did the right thing," she said, pouring my tea. "They need to realize that relationships are a two-way street." "Lenora's furious," I sighed. "She said I'd regret it." "For what?" "About not giving a teenager money to party by the lake without adult supervision." Sylvia shook her head. "Griffin, not only do you have the right to set boundaries, you have to do it. For your own sake and for theirs." "I'm just afraid of losing them," I admitted. "They're all I have left." Sylvia looked at me with such sympathy and warmth that I felt a lump in my throat. "First of all, if they're only tied to you by money, it's not a real relationship," she said softly. "Second, you're not alone. You have friends who value you, not your wallet." She took my hand and we sat like that, looking out at the fading day. After that Beckett story, the tension with my family had only gotten worse. Lenora called less often, and when she did, the conversation was cold and strained. Beckett stopped dropping by altogether. Fiona texted me asking for money for a new dress for the school dance, but when I offered to go shopping with her instead of money and pick out a dress together, she declined. Lloyd, however, never gave up trying to get at my savings. He stopped by one evening while I was working in the garden. "Griffin," he began, standing by the fence, "I wanted to talk to you about that real estate investment idea." "I'm still thinking about it," I replied, not stopping to trim the bushes. "Listen," he shifted to a confiding tone, "I found a great one. It's in a good neighborhood, it needs a few minor repairs, but then the value will skyrocket by at least 30%. I straightened up and looked at him. "How much do you need to invest?" "The down payment is $200,000, Lloyd said, as if it were $200. "But it's a good investment, I assure you." "And the house will be in whose name?" I asked bluntly. Lloyd hesitated. "Well, given your age, we thought it would be more logical to put it in my and Lenora's name, to avoid inheritance problems in the future. I mean, I should give you $200,000 and the house would be yours," I summarized. "Is that how it works, Lloyd?" "You misunderstand," he started to get defensive. "It's an investment for the whole family, for the future." "For your future," I clarified. "What do I get?" "You get the assurance that your money is working, not lying around dead," Lloyd said faster and faster. "And of course, you'll always be able to visit us in our new home." "Stay," I repeated. "In the house I paid for. That's very generous of you." Lloyd blushed, either with anger or embarrassment. "Look, if you don't want to help your own daughter and grandchildren, just say so," he almost shouted. "Don't play the victim." "I'm not a victim, Lloyd," I said calmly. "And I'm helping my family. But there's a difference between helping and being a cash cow." "You're going to regret this," he said, turning around. "Lenora was right about you." I watched him walk away and thought about the fact that both daughter and son-in-law used the same phrase, "You'll regret it." It sounded almost like a threat. In the following weeks, the situation only got worse. Lenora stopped calling completely. So did the grandchildren. I tried to contact them myself a few times, but the conversation was always short and awkward. I told Todd about it during our regular meeting at the coffee shop. "They're trying to break you," he said. "It's emotional blackmail. They think that if they stop communicating, you'll get scared and start giving them money again." "Maybe they're right," I admitted. "I miss them, especially the grandkids." "That's okay." Todd put his hand on my shoulder. "But think about it. Do they really miss you, or just your money? True love doesn't depend on material possessions." I knew he was right, but it's one thing to understand it with your mind, and quite another to accept it with your heart. Esther always said I was too soft, that I let Lenora manipulate me. She was the only one who could put our daughter in her place. After she died, Lenora completely stopped holding back. "I don't know what to do," I said to Todd. "I want to mend the relationship, but I don't want to go back to being an ATM machine." "Then offer them something that doesn't involve money," Todd advised. "Your time, your attention, your care. If they accept it, great. If they don't, well, then you'll know exactly what they want from you." I decided to take his advice. I called Lenora and offered to take the grandkids out for the weekend, to go to the movies, the park, wherever. She replied that the kids were busy, but I could hear their voices in the background. I tried a few more times, offering different options. The result was always the same, a polite but firm refusal. Finally, I decided to stop by unannounced, just to see the grandchildren, to talk to my daughter face to face. Lenora opened the door and froze when she saw me. "Dad? What are you doing here?" "I wanted to see you and the kids," I said simply. We hadn't talked in a while. She hesitated, clearly reluctant to let me in, but also hesitant to slam the door in my face. "This isn't a good time," she said finally. "We have guests." I could see she was lying. Behind her back, I could see the empty hallway, hearing only the sound of the TV from the living room. Lenora, I sighed. I didn't bring my checkbook. I just want to see my family. Is it really that much? She pressed her lips together. It's not about the money, Dad. It's just that you've changed. You've gotten kind of callous. Kids can sense that. Stale? I couldn't believe my ears. Because I don't buy Beckett trips with his friends or give Lloyd 200 grand for a house. See? She flapped her arms. You're making this about money, like that's all we come to you for. Didn't we? I asked quietly. When was the last time you asked me how I was feeling? When you took an interest in my life? When you came just to sit with me, without asking? Lenora was silent, obviously unable to find an answer. I love you, I continued, all of you. But I don't want to be just an ATM. I want to be a father and a grandfather. No one's stopping you, she finally found an answer. But a family should help each other. And you've been doing nothing but turning us down lately. I'm willing to help, I said, but not to be a cash cow. There's a difference. We stood opposite each other, separated not only by a threshold but also by years of misunderstanding. I saw in her eyes not the daughter I'd raised, but a stranger who saw me only as a purse. I think you should leave, she finally said. Call me when you're ready to discuss our real problems. By real issues, of course, she meant money. Not our relationship, not mutual respect, just money. I left with a heavy heart. The drive home seemed longer than usual. I felt as if I had lost my family for the second time. First Esther, now Lenora and the grandchildren. At home, I sat in my chair and looked at the picture of us all together for a long time. Still happy, still family. I didn't know what to do next. Give in and become an ATM again, or keep my self-respect but lose my last connection to my family. That evening, Todd called. He wanted to know how my visit with Lenora had gone. I told him everything. Give them time, he advised. They're used to seeing you as a source of money. They need time to realize you're more than that. And if they never realize? I asked. Then you'll have to decide what's more important, their presence in your life on their terms or your self-respect, Todd replied. I know it's a tough choice, but remember, you deserve respect, especially from your own family. I didn't know if he was right. I didn't know if I had the strength to keep standing my ground. I just knew I could no longer be just an ATM for people who should love me for something other than money. It had been 2 weeks since my failed visit with Lenora. She hadn't called, neither had the grandchildren. I was beginning to get used to the silence of the phone, to the fact that no one was asking for money, asking for help. It was a strange feeling, a mixture of loneliness and relief. Wednesday night, as I was making dinner, the phone rang. Lenora's number. I hesitated before answering it, but pressed the button anyway. Hello? Hi, Dad. Her voice sounded unusually warm, almost like old times. How are you? I'm fine, I answered cautiously. And you? I'm good. Listen, Lloyd and I wanted to invite you to dinner this Friday night. Nothing fancy, just a family night. I didn't say anything. The last family night ended with me talking about good investments and demanding money for a concert. Dad? She broke the silence. Are you coming? What's the occasion? I asked directly. Do you have to have an excuse to see your father? She sounded a little annoyed, but she pulled herself together quickly. We just missed him. The kids, too. Kids who haven't called me in a month. Kids who weren't home when I came over. Okay, I finally agreed. What time? 7 o'clock. And Dad, she paused. I'll make your favorite apple pie. That couldn't have happened. Lenora hadn't baked since college. All the desserts in their house were either store-bought or convenience foods. I'll be waiting, I said, not knowing what else to add. See you Friday, she said goodbye and hung up. I stood with the phone in my hand, trying to figure out what had happened. Why the sudden warmth? Why the promise to bake a pie she'd never made? Something didn't add up. I called Todd for advice. "They're up to something," he said, right after I told him about the call. "This sudden interest, the promise of pie. I bet they're going to ask for money again." "But for what?" I shook my head, though Todd couldn't see it. "Lenora knows I won't give her money for nothing." "So they've come up with something new," Todd suggested. "Be careful, Griffin, and keep your purse closed." I promised to be cautious, but part of me still hoped that Lenora really wanted to mend the relationship, that this wasn't another attempt to get at my money. I arrived at their house at 7 sharp on Friday. Lloyd opened the door with a wide smile, another worrying sign. Usually he barely said hello. "Griffin!" he exclaimed as if I were an old friend. Come in, come in. Lenora's just finishing up dinner." The house looked especially clean and cozy. The dining room was decorated with candles, the best set I'd given them for their 10th wedding anniversary. Beckett and Fiona sat in the living room, both unusually neatly dressed. They looked up when I walked in and even stood up to say hello. Fiona even gave me a hug, the first in months. "Hi, Grandpa," Beckett said with a smile. "It's been a long time." "Yeah, a long time," I agreed, still not sure what was going on. Lenora came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron, a sight so unusual that I almost wondered who she was and what she'd done to my daughter. "Daddy!" She hugged me, and I could smell the perfume I'd given her last Christmas. "I'm so glad you came." Dinner passed in a strange, almost surreal atmosphere. Lenora inquired about my health. Lloyd told funny stories from work. The grandchildren talked about school and didn't look at their phones. No one asked for money, complained about life, or hinted at profitable investments. I began to relax. Maybe they really did miss me. Maybe my decision to set boundaries made them reconsider their attitude toward me. After dinner, Lenora actually served apple pie. It wasn't as good as Esther's or even Sylvia's, but the very fact that she baked it for me touched my heart. "Thank you," I said sincerely. "It's been a long time since I've had home baking." "What about your neighbor?" Lenora asked with a touch of jealousy. "Beckett said she bakes for you all the time." "Sylvia sometimes brings pies," I admitted, "but yours is special." Lenora smiled, clearly pleased with the compliment. After dessert, the grandchildren retired to their rooms, leaving the three of us, me, Lenora, and Lloyd. That's when the real conversation began. "Dad," Lenora took a deep breath, "we wanted to talk to you about something important." I tensed up. This was it. Now they were going to get to the point, the real reason for this dinner. "Lloyd and I have been thinking a lot about the future," she continued. "About the children, about their education, about our lives." Lloyd nodded, looking at me with a strange expression, a mixture of hope and calculation. "And we decided it was time to move on." Lenora took her husband's hand. "Our house was getting too small. The children need more space, their own rooms to study in. Lloyd needs an office to work in." I was silent, waiting for him to continue. "We found the perfect place." Lloyd pulled a folded piece of paper out of his pocket and unfolded it in front of me. It was a printout of a listing for a house for sale. 5 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, an office, a backyard with a pool, in a great neighborhood near the best school in town. I looked at the price and almost choked. $790,000. "And you want—" I started, knowing the answer. "We want you to help us with this house." Lenora squeezed my hand. "You always said you wanted the best for us. This is the best we can give the children. And ourselves," I added. "We're a family," Lenora objected. "What's good for us is good for the children." I looked at the picture of the house. It was really beautiful. Big, modern, with spacious rooms and all the amenities. The kind of house that Lenora had always dreamed of. "What's wrong with your current house?" I asked. "It's cramped," Lloyd answered quickly. "There's no place for the children to study. I have to work at the kitchen table." "You have 4 bedrooms," I reminded him. and a living room and a dining room and a kitchen. But there's no study, Lloyd insisted. And the backyard is too small, and the neighborhood isn't the same anymore. I saw them look at each other. They were rehearsing this conversation, preparing their arguments, strategizing. "How much do you want from me?" I asked bluntly. "A down payment," Lloyd said. 200,000. We'll mortgage the rest. 200,000. Money I'd been saving for years. Money that could buy me a secure old age or help my grandchildren with college. "And what do I get in return?" That question clearly took them by surprise. "What do you mean?" Lenora frowned. "If I give you 200,000, what do I get? A share in the house? A say in family decisions? Respect?" "You'd get our gratitude," Lloyd replied, clearly not understanding what I was getting at. "And of course, you'll always be able to come to us." "As a guest," I clarified. "You're our family," Lenora exclaimed. "Not a guest. But the house will be registered to you." I looked into their eyes. "Do I understand correctly?" They looked at each other again. "Considering your age," Lloyd began. "Yes, my age," I interrupted him. "I'm 77 years old. I could live another 15 or 20 years, or die tomorrow. And you want me to give you 200,000 without any guarantees?" "We are your family," Lenora repeated, raising her voice. "What other guarantees do you need?" "A family that only visits me when you need money?" I shook my head. "A family that doesn't ask how I'm feeling? A family that didn't invite me over for dinner for months until they needed 200,000? That's not fair." Lenora pounded her fist on the table. "We've always taken care of you." "When?" I asked. "When was the last time you came to me for nothing? When you took an interest in my life? When Beckett or Fiona didn't call me to ask for money?" "You're getting paranoid." Lloyd tried to sound calm, but I could see the muscles in his face tense. "It's normal at your age, but you have to trust your family." "Trust?" I grinned bitterly. "After everything that's happened?" "What was what?" Lenora was almost screaming. "What did we do that was so terrible? Asked for help? Is that a crime?" "It's not about asking." I started to raise my voice too. "It's about how you treat me. I'm not your father and grandfather. I'm an ATM machine." "That's not true." Lenora jumped up from her chair. "You've just become greedy and callous. Mom would never—" "Don't you dare speak for Mom." I stood up too. "Esther always saw right through you. She knew when you were manipulating us. How dare you?" Lenora's face contorted with anger. "After all we've done for you. What have you done?" I looked her in the eye. "What exactly have you done for me?" She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, but there was no answer. Because there was no answer. They didn't do anything for me. They just took and took. "You just don't understand," Lloyd interjected. "This house is an investment in the future, in our future together." "Your future," I corrected, "not mine. I'll only be the guest of honor if you even invite me." "That's my husband," Lenora shouted, pointing at Lloyd. "He's sick of living in a cramped house. You should buy him a fancy new house." I looked at my daughter and didn't recognize her. Where had that sweet girl that Esther and I had raised gone? When did she turn into this greedy, selfish woman? "I don't have to buy anything for anyone," I said quietly, "especially people who only see me as a purse." "You?" Lenora gasped with rage. "You pathetic, selfish old man. You think only of yourself, and we are your family." "Family doesn't act like that," I shook my head. "Family takes care of each other. Family respects each other." "We respect you," Lloyd exclaimed. "We named a dog after you." I blinked. "You don't have a dog." "I did." Lloyd blushed. "Last year. She ran away. I've never heard of a dog. They didn't even bother to come up with a plausible lie." "I'm leaving," I said, heading for the exit. "This conversation is pointless." "No!" Lenora grabbed my arm. "You're not leaving until the house is settled." "It's already settled." I released my hand. "I'm not giving you any money." "You'll regret it," Lenora hissed. "I swear you'll regret it." I turned toward the stairs leading to the first floor. Their house was 2 stories high and the dining room was on the second floor. "Dad!" Lenora grabbed my hand again, harder than before. "You can't just leave." "I can." I broke free again. "And I'm leaving." I took a step toward the stairs, but Lenora was in front of me. "You've ruined my life," she screamed. "Always controlling, always criticizing. And now when I ask for help, you refuse." "I've been helping you for years," I objected. "But there's a limit to everything." "A limit to your greed?" She shoved me in the chest. Not hard. More like defiantly. "Or your stupidity." I staggered, but I held my ground. "Lenora, calm down." Lloyd came toward us. "He's an old man. You can hurt him." "I don't care." She pushed me again, harder. "He deserves it. He betrayed his family." I took a step back, finding myself at the very edge of the stairs. "That's enough," I said firmly. "I'm leaving." "No!" Lenora rushed at me, eyes full of rage. "You're not leaving until you give us the money." She pushed me with both hands hard, with all the anger she had in her. I lost my balance and felt my feet slip off the top step. Time slowed down. I saw the horror on Lloyd's face, late in realizing what was happening. I saw Lenora, whose face went from angry to terrified. I heard the scream, not realizing if it was mine or someone else's. And then there was the pain, an intense, all-consuming pain as my body hit the steps. One, another, another, another. I rolled down, unable to stop, feeling something crunching inside of me. The last thing I remember before I passed out was Fiona's face, looking out of her room at the noise and her scream, "Grandpa!" I woke up in the hospital. White ceiling, instruments beeping, the smell of antiseptic. It was just like the time Esther died, only now I was the patient. "Mr. Windley?" The nurse's voice brought me out of my daze. "Can you hear me?" "Yes." My voice sounded hoarse. What happened?" "You fell down the stairs." She checked the IV. "You have 3 broken ribs, a cracked femur, and a concussion. You're lucky you didn't break your neck." Lucky. I could laugh if it wasn't for the pain in every breath. "How did I get here?" "Your brother-in-law called an ambulance," the nurse said. "They brought you in last night." "Last night?" I tried to get up, but the pain pierced my whole body. "I was unconscious all day?" "They kept you in a medically induced sleep," she explained, "to reduce the swelling in your brain. But you're fine now. The doctor will be here soon to examine you." She left, leaving me alone with my thoughts and my pain. I remembered last night, Lenora's scream, her hands pushing me towards the stairs, my own daughter, flesh of my flesh. The doctor came in half an hour later, a young man with tired eyes and a kind face. "Mr. Windley, I'm Dr. Noble," he looked at my chart. "How do you feel?" "Like a man who has rolled down the stairs," I answered with a bitter chuckle. "Well, that's an accurate description," he smiled weakly. "You have serious injuries, but nothing life-threatening. You'll have to stay in the hospital for a week or 2, then rehab. Will I be able to live alone?" That was the big question. I didn't want to depend on anyone, especially Lenora. "In time, yes," the doctor nodded. "But you'll need help at first. Do you have someone who could take care of you?" I wondered. Lenora was out of the question. Todd could barely walk with a cane. There was only my neighbor, I said. "Sylvia Parks. She might be able to help, but we need to get in touch with her." "Of course," the doctor made a note. "We'll get you a phone when you're feeling better. In the meantime, get some rest." He left, and I was alone again. I remembered Lenora's last words before I fell. "You're not leaving until you give us money." What does she feel now? Remorse, fear, or just anxiety that she definitely won't get the money for the house now? By late afternoon, I was feeling a little better. The nurse brought the phone, and I called Sylvia. She was horrified when she heard what had happened and promised to come the next day. I saw the ambulance outside Lenora's house, she said, but I thought it was something with the kids. Oh, Griffin, how could this have happened? I didn't tell her the truth. I just said I lost my balance and fell. The full truth could wait until I met her in person. The next morning, as I was eating breakfast, if you could call hospital porridge and tea breakfast, the door of the room opened. I expected to see a nurse or a doctor, but it was Lenora. She looked awful pale, with circles under her eyes, her hair in a sloppy ponytail. She was wearing the same sweater she wore the day we had dinner. "Daddy," her voice shook. "How are you?" "Alive," I answered briefly. She hesitantly approached the bed. I was so worried. We were all worried. "Really?" I couldn't help my sarcasm. "And how did it manifest itself? The fact that you didn't even call to check on me." "We did," she objected. "But they told us you were unconscious, and then they said you were resting. We didn't want to intrude." I looked at her, trying to see sincerity, but all I saw was fear. Not for me, for herself. "What did you tell the doctors?" I asked. "About how I fell." She averted her eyes. "That you lost your balance, stumbled. And they believed it. Why wouldn't they?" She fidgeted nervously with the sleeve of her sweater. "You're an old man. These things happen." I was silent, looking at her. "My daughter, the woman who pushed me down the stairs for money. And now she fears not for my health, but for her freedom." "Lenora," I said at last, "I want you to leave." "What?" She looked genuinely surprised. "But I've only just come. I wanted to sit with you, to talk." "About what?" I interrupted. "About the $790,000 house, about how cramped your 4 bedrooms are, or how you pushed me down the stairs." "I didn't," she stammered. "It was an accident. I didn't mean for you to fall. But you pushed me." I looked her straight in the eye. "Intentionally, with force, when I was standing at the edge of the stairs." "I was furious," she admitted. "But I didn't want you to get hurt. I swear, Daddy." "Go away," I repeated. "I don't want to see you." "Papa, please." She took my hand. "Let's forget this terrible evening. Let's start over. I'll take care of you, help with rehab." "So you can ask me for money again?" I let go of her hand. "No, Lenora, it's over." "What do you mean?" Fear appeared in her eyes. "I won't be your ATM anymore," I said firmly, "and I don't want to see a man who values money more than his own father." "That's not fair." She raised her voice, then came to her senses and spoke quietly again. "It was an accident." "I love you, Daddy." "No," I shook my head, writhing in pain. "You love my money. There's a difference." She looked at me with such despair that for a moment I almost believed her remorse. But then I remembered her face contorted with rage, her hands pushing me toward the abyss, and my heart closed again. "Go away," I said for the 3rd time. "And don't come back. I won't sue you for what you did, but I don't want to see you again." "You can't do this," she whispered. "I'm your daughter, the only daughter. The daughter who almost killed her father for money." I closed my eyes, feeling tired. "Please go away." I heard her stand up, her footsteps heading for the door. Then the footsteps stopped. "You're going to regret this," she said quietly, but with such hatred that it sent shivers down my spine. "I swear you'll regret it." The door slammed shut. I opened my eyes and looked out the window at the gray sky. In that moment, I made a decision I should have made a long time ago. No one would use me anymore. No one will manipulate me. No one will see me only as a source of money. I'm going to change my life. And I'm going to start by changing my will. I spent 12 days in the hospital, 12 long days filled with pain, sleepless nights, and wondering how my own daughter could have brought the situation to this. Lenora never came again, but sent flowers with faceless get-well-soon cards. Not a word of apology, not an admission of guilt. It was as if she really believed it was an accident. But Sylvia visited me every day. She brought me home-cooked meals, books, news from the neighborhood, sitting with me for hours, helping me with basic things I couldn't do myself because of my broken ribs. Never once asked me what exactly happened at Lenora's house. Waited until I was ready to tell her. Todd also came as far as his health would allow. He knew right away that the fall wasn't an accident, but he didn't push it either. He just said, "Whatever happens, I'm on your side." The day I was discharged, Sylvia came to pick me up in her old Volvo. A nurse wheeled me in a wheelchair to the exit. Hospital protocol, even though I could already walk with a cane. Dr. Noble gave me detailed instructions about rehabilitation, medications, and restrictions. "No sudden movements," he said. "No exertion. Carry the cane with you at all times and be sure to come in for checkups." I nodded, wincing at the pain in my ribs. Even a simple movement like nodding still caused discomfort. When would I be able to live on my own? That was the question that bothered me the most. "Not before a month," the doctor answered. "And that's assuming a good recovery. You'll need help with cooking, laundry, maybe even bathing at first." "I'll take care of him," assured Sylvia, who was standing next to him. "I have experience in caring for the sick. My husband was sick for a long time before he died." The doctor nodded, obviously satisfied with her answer. "Then I expect to see you in a week for a checkup, Mr. Windley." The drive home was quiet. I looked out the window at the familiar streets of Bowers, at the people going about their business, at the trees beginning to turn yellow. Autumn was coming. Life went on. The world didn't stop because of my drama. "I've prepared the guest bedroom in my house." Sylvia broke the silence. "It's on the first floor. You won't have to climb the stairs." "Sylvia," I turned to her, "I can't ask you to do that. It's too much." "You didn't ask," she smiled, not taking her eyes off the road. "I suggested it. And besides, your house isn't fit for someone with injuries. There are too many stairs." She was right. My house, like most in our neighborhood, was 2 stories, with an awkward layout for someone with limited mobility. "I don't want to be a burden," I said quietly. "You're not a burden." She put her hand on mine for a second. "You're a friend who needs help. I might be in your shoes someday, and I hope you won't leave me either." I couldn't find anything to object. Deep down, I was grateful for her concern, for not having to return to an empty house where every step would be a reminder of the fall. Sylvia had indeed prepared for my arrival. The guest room was clean and cozy, with a comfortable bed and a table on which stood a glass of water, my medication, a book, and a lamp. In the bathroom, she had installed special handrails to make it easier for me to sit down and stand up. "You've thought of everything," I said, looking around the room. "I wanted you to be comfortable." She helped me into a chair. "Get some rest, and I'll make dinner." I sat in the chair, listening to Sylvia fiddling in the kitchen, and thought about how strange life was. A stranger shows more care and attention than a native daughter. A neighbor becomes closer than family. After lunch, delicious chicken soup and fresh bread, I decided it was time to take action, time to change my life just as I had promised myself in the hospital. "Sylvia," I said as we drank tea, "I need to contact my lawyer. It's important." She looked at me carefully and nodded without asking any questions. "Sure. Do you want me to call him and make an appointment?" "If that's okay." I was grateful for her understanding. "His name is Miles Fenton. The number should be in my phone." Sylvia found the number and called. Miles, hearing about my condition, immediately offered to come himself instead of me driving to his office. We made an appointment for the next day. Miles Fenton had been my lawyer for 20 years. He handled all of Esther and I's legal matters, from buying a house to drafting a will. He was about 15 years younger than me, but he was approaching retirement age as well. The next day, at 10 o'clock sharp, he showed up on Sylvia's doorstep. She ushered him into the living room where I was already waiting, sitting in a chair. "Griffin," Miles shook my hand, careful not to hurt it. "I'm sorry to hear about your accident." "It wasn't an accident," I said bluntly. "I'd been pushed." Miles froze. Pushed? By who? My daughter. I saw his eyes widen. Lenora. Sylvia groaned softly. I hadn't told her the details until now. Oh my God, she whispered. Griffin, why didn't you say anything? I didn't want to believe it myself, I answered. But it's true. She pushed me as I stood at the stairs, deliberately. Miles sat down across from me, his face serious, professional. Do you want to sue her? He asked. That's a serious charge. Assault, maybe even attempted murder. No, I shook my head. I don't want a trial. I want something else. What's that? I want to change the will, I said firmly, completely, to exclude Lenora and her family from inheritance. Miles thought for a moment. That's possible, of course, but they could contest the will after you're dead, claiming you were incapacitated or under the influence. Then make sure that doesn't happen, I was adamant. Run all the necessary forensics. Videotape my testimony. Anything to make sure they don't get a dime. Okay. Miles opened his briefcase and pulled out a laptop. Let's go over the details. Who do you want to leave the inheritance to? I've already thought about it. Long and hard. Most of it to charity. There's an old people's fund that Esther and I have always helped, and a children's hospice that Esther supported. Miles nodded, taking notes. And the house? The car? Personal effects? The house, I wondered. I don't know. Sell it and donate the money to charity, too. I suppose so, Miles agreed. But there are other options. You could leave it to someone specific. I looked at Sylvia, who was sitting quietly to the side, giving us room to talk. No, I think I'd rather sell it, I decided, and split the money between the foundations. We talked for another hour or so, going over the details of the new will. Miles was thorough, offering different options, warning me about possible problems. I'll have all the documents ready by the end of the week, he said, closing his laptop. You'll need to sign them in the presence of witnesses. I will invite a notary and another lawyer from my firm. Thank you, Miles. I was grateful for his professionalism. One more favor. Don't tell anyone about these changes, especially Lenora or Lloyd if they contact you. Of course, he nodded seriously. Client confidentiality is the foundation of my work. After Miles left, Sylvia sat down next to me. Griffin, she took my hand. Why didn't you tell me that Lenora pushed you? I didn't want to believe it myself, I repeated. My own daughter. It was too hard to accept. But how did it happen? There was genuine sympathy in her eyes. What caused such a reaction? I told her everything. About the demand to buy the house for $790,000, about my refusal, about Lenora's anger, about her words. You're not leaving until you give us the money. The way she pushed me when I was standing at the stairs. Oh my God. Sylvia squeezed my hand tighter. That's terrible. You should have reported it to the police. What good would that have done? I smiled sadly. Would my daughter have gone to jail? I wouldn't have stood for that no matter what. And then she has children. Children who see how their mother treats their own father, Sylvia pointed out. What kind of example is she setting for them? I couldn't help agreeing with her, but I still didn't want to go to court. A change of will seemed punishment enough. Lenora and Lloyd wouldn't get the money they'd hoped for, and the realization would haunt them for the rest of my life. At the end of the week, as promised, Miles arrived with the finished documents, a notary, and a fellow lawyer. We went through all the necessary procedures, including a videotape of me explaining the reasons for changing the will, confirming that I was of sound mind and acting of my own free will. It's done, Miles said as the last signature was put down. Now your will be executed no matter what Lenora does. Thank you. I felt strangely relieved, as if the weight I'd been carrying for years had finally been lifted from my shoulders. Days turned into weeks. I was recovering from my injuries, each day getting a little stronger. Sylvia was by my side, helping with the rehab exercises Dr. Noble prescribed. She turned her backyard into a small gym for me, complete with light dumbbells, an exercise bench, and special rubber bands for stretching. We worked out every morning, gradually increasing the load. "You're getting stronger," she remarked one day when I had done a series of exercises without a single break. "Soon you'll be stronger than you were before the fall." "Thanks to you," I replied sincerely. "Without your help, I'd still be lying there feeling sorry for myself." She smiled, and in that moment I realized how important she had become to me, not just as a caregiver or a friend, but as someone I wanted to spend my remaining years with. The thought terrified me. After Esther's death, I didn't think I could feel that way about anyone else. It was like I was betraying my wife's memory. But then I remembered our last conversation, when she already knew she was dying. "Griff," she said then, holding my hand, "promise me you won't live in the past. Find happiness after me. I don't want you to be alone." I promised, though I didn't believe I could fulfill that promise. But looking at Sylvia, I realized that perhaps Esther, as always, was right. One morning, as we were having breakfast on the veranda, a familiar car pulled up to the house. Lenora. I tensed, feeling my heart begin to beat faster. "Do you want me to ask her to leave?" Sylvia asked, noticing my reaction. "No," I shook my head. "I have to do it myself." Lenora looked different, impeccably dressed with perfect hair and makeup. In her hands was a box of cake from the best bakery in town. "Daddy," she smiled when she saw me on the veranda, "it's good to have you in the air. I brought your favorite pie." I looked at her, trying to see a drop of sincere remorse, but all I saw was a mask, the perfect mask of a caring daughter put on for her own purposes. "Hello, Lenora." My voice was flat. "Why did you come?" "To see you, of course." She came up to the veranda. "To see how you were feeling. We were all so worried." "Were you?" I didn't hide my skepticism. "Not one call in a month, not one visit, and all of a sudden, you're so concerned." "I called," she said quickly, "but your roommate said you were resting or busy with the physical therapist." Sylvia raised her eyebrows. "I apologize, but that's not true. There hasn't been a single call from you." Lenora threw her a disapproving look. "Daddy, can we talk in private?" She turned to me with a pleading expression. "This is a family thing." "Sylvia is a close friend of mine," I replied. "She can hear everything you have to say." Lenora tightened her lips but gave in. "All right, I came to apologize. What happened? It was awful. I never meant for you to get hurt." "But you pushed me." I looked her in the eye, knowing I was standing by the stairs. "I was furious," she admitted. "But I didn't think you'd fall. I swear, Dad. It was a terrible mistake and I repent every day." I wanted to believe her. Part of me, the fatherly part, wanted to believe she was truly sorry. But the other part, the rational part, remembered her face in the hospital, her "you'll be sorry" threat. And that part didn't trust a word she said. "Why did you really come here, Lenora?" I asked her bluntly. "What do you want?" She looked offended. "Is it so hard to believe that I'm just worried about you, that I want to make things right with you? After everything that's happened?" "Yeah, it's hard." I was adamant. "You were never interested in my life until you needed money. What's changed?" Lenora was silent, clearly unprepared for such a rebuff. She expected me to be glad to see her, to believe her remorse. "Daddy," she tried again, in a different tone of voice, "I know I behaved wrongly. We all have. But we're your family, the only family." "Family doesn't push each other down the stairs for money," I replied, "and it doesn't show up with fake apologies a month later." "They're not fake," she exclaimed. "I'm really sorry." "For what exactly?" I didn't give up. "That I got hurt? Or about definitely not getting the money for the house now?" Her face contorted for a moment, revealing her true feelings, but she quickly pulled herself together. "I deserved it," she said quietly. "Your anger, your distrust, but I hope that in time you can forgive me." We could start over. Why? I asked. So you can use me again? No, she almost screamed. To be a family, a real family. I looked at her and saw not a repentant daughter, but an actress playing a role. Every gesture, every intonation was calculated to provoke a certain reaction in me. Lenora, I said tiredly, I don't believe you. And I don't want you in my life. Please go away. You can't just cut us out of your life. She turned to threats. We're your heirs at law, your blood. And here's the real reason for the visit. She somehow found out about my visit to the lawyer. Maybe Miles was right about trying to contest the will. Go away, I repeated. Don't come back. You'll regret it. She tossed the pie on the table. We're not going to let She threw a scornful glance at Sylvia, an alien woman stealing what is rightfully ours. Sylvia isn't stealing anything, I replied calmly. She is the only person who cares for me without any benefit to herself. You're a naive old man. Lenora was no longer hiding her fury. Do you think she's just messing around with you? She knows how much money you have. She knows you're rich. Unlike you, she's never asked me for a dime. I could feel the anger rising inside me. Now go away, or I'll call the police. Lenora looked as if I had hit her. Something resembling pain flashed in her eyes for a moment, but was quickly replaced by cold fury. This isn't over, she said, turning around. Lloyd's right about you. You're an ungrateful egomaniac. She left, slamming the gate. I sat there feeling a strange mixture of bitterness and relief. Bitterness that my only daughter had turned out like this, and relief that I'd finally told her the truth. Are you all right? Sylvia asked quietly, putting her hand on my shoulder. I will be, I answered, covering her hand with mine. Thank you for being there for me. 2 days after Lenora's visit, Lloyd arrived. Alone, without his wife and children. He seemed more businesslike and less emotional than Lenora. Griffin. He didn't smile, didn't try to feign concern. We need to talk. About what? I met him at the gate without inviting him inside. About what you're doing, changing your will, pushing your family away. It's wrong. Is pushing your father down the stairs right? I asked. Lloyd grimaced. It was an accident. Lenora never meant to hurt you. But she did, I pointed to my cane. And not just physically. Look, Lloyd cut to the chase, we know you changed your will, disinherited us. And how did you find out? I asked. Miles couldn't tell you. I have my sources, he replied evasively, but that's not important. What matters is that you're making a mistake. A big mistake. I don't think so. I stood firmly, leaning on my cane. We can contest the new will, he was threatening now. Prove that you were incapacitated, or under the influence of, by certain individuals. He glanced toward Sylvia's house. You can try. I didn't give in to the provocation. Miles had anticipated every possible claim, including a videotape of me explaining the reasons for my decision, and a medical report that I was legally competent. Lloyd was visibly tense. He hadn't expected me to be so well prepared. This is wrong, Griffin, he tried to appeal to my conscience. Lenora is your daughter. Beckett and Fiona are your grandchildren. You're disinheriting them because of one mistake? Because of many mistakes, I corrected. Because of years of neglect. Because you saw me only as a source of money. And yes, because Lenora pushed me down the stairs and then couldn't even find the strength to apologize sincerely. We could sue you, Lloyd went straight to threats, for defamation. You're accusing Lenora of assault without any proof. I have proof, I lied. I didn't really have any, but Lloyd couldn't know that. And if you sue, I'll use it. Is that what you want? A public scandal? Publicity that a daughter pushed her father down the stairs for money? Lloyd turned pale. He realized the consequences of such a scandal, for his reputation, for his career, for their standing in society. You're bluffing, he said, but without confidence. Check it out. I looked him straight in the eye. Sue me, and we'll find out. We stood across from each other, two men connected only through the woman who had hurt me. I could see Lloyd weighing his options, calculating the risks. "This isn't over," he finally said, stepping back. "We'll find a way to get what's rightfully ours." "What right?" I asked. "By right of power? By right of greed? Or by the right of the blood you were so easily willing to spill?" He didn't answer, just turned and walked away to his car. I watched him go, feeling strangely calm. 6 months flew by. Winter gave way to spring, and then summer. My injuries had healed, though on rainy days my knee still gave me a dull ache. Dr. Noble said this was normal at my age and after such an injury. I moved back into my house, but Sylvia remained an important part of my life. We spent almost every day together, breakfast in her garden or mine, cooking dinner together, watching old movies we loved when we were young. Sometimes we went to concerts or exhibitions in the neighboring town. Once we even went to the lake, where we spent the whole day just sitting on the shore and talking about everything in the world. During that time, I learned more about Sylvia than in all the previous years of being a neighbor. I learned that she was born in a small town in the West, that she studied literature in college, that she met her husband Harold at a book fair where they were both trying to buy the same rare book. I learned that they'd been together 35 years, but they'd had no children. First they'd put it off. Then it hadn't worked out. Then they'd decided they were fine on their own. She learned a lot about me, too. About my childhood in the suburbs, my first meeting with Esther in the college library, our wedding, the birth of Lenora, my career, the dreams and plans Esther and I had for retirement. One evening, as we sat on my veranda watching the sunset, Sylvia asked, "You never talked about the trips you planned with Esther. Where did you want to go?" I smiled, remembering. Esther had made a whole list: Venice, Prague, Kyoto, Buenos Aires, Sydney, Cape Town. She always loved to travel, even in her dreams. We only made it to Venice before she got sick. "Did you like it?" "Very much," I nodded. "In spite of the crowds of tourists and the inflated prices, there's a special magic in the air there, a city that shouldn't exist but exists against all odds." "Why don't you go again?" Sylvia suggested. "Visit all the places on Esther's list." "I've been thinking. I used to think that without Esther, these trips were meaningless, that I'd be betraying her memory if I went alone. But now, looking at the setting sun and feeling Sylvia's warm hand in mine, I realize that Esther would want me to live life to the fullest." "You know," I said at last, "it's not such a bad idea." "I could come with you," Sylvia suggested quietly. "If you want the company." I looked at her silver hair in a simple bun, at the wrinkles around her eyes that appeared when she smiled, at her hands, veined but still strong and confident. "I would like that very much," I replied sincerely. That evening we started planning our trip. We decided to start in Europe, Prague, Budapest, Vienna, then Venice again, but together. I took out the old guidebooks that Esther had collected over the years, and we sat up late into the night, studying the routes and sights. There had been no word from Lenora and Lloyd in 6 months. After that unpleasant conversation with Lloyd, I expected more attempts at influence, perhaps even a lawsuit, but nothing happened. It was as if they had decided to wait it out, hoping that time would soften my judgment. I haven't heard from my grandchildren either. I tried several times to contact them directly. I sent messages, made phone calls, but got no response. Apparently, Lenora and Lloyd had turned them against me by telling some distorted version of events. The thought hurt, but I learned to live with it. Sylvia helped me realize that I cannot control the actions of others, even if they are my family. I can only control my reactions and decisions. "Don't let them steal your happiness," she said. "You deserve joy and peace regardless of their behavior." And I tried to follow that advice. I focused on the good things in my life, on my friendship with Sylvia, which was slowly turning into something more, on planning my trip, on my garden, which yielded a particularly rich tomato crop this year. I even started writing a memoir, not for publication, but for myself, to make sense of the past, to understand where and when things went wrong with Lenora, what I might have done differently as a father. One warm June day when Sylvia and I were working in my garden, I was pruning bushes, she was weeding strawberry beds. A familiar car pulled up in front of the house. Lenora, Lloyd, and, surprisingly, both grandchildren, Beckett and Fiona. I tensed, feeling my pulse quicken. 6 months without contact, and suddenly they all appear together, like the perfect family on a Christmas card. "Do you want me to leave?" Sylvia asked quietly, wiping her hands on the garden apron. "No," I shook my head. "Stay. I might need your support." She nodded and went on with her work, but I could see she was wary. Lenora was the first to get out of the car and headed for the wicket. She was wearing a light summer dress, her hair gathered into a neat ponytail. She looked younger and fresher than the last time I saw her. "Daddy," she smiled uncertainly, "can we come in?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to slam the gate in their faces. The other part wanted to hug the grandchildren I hadn't seen in 6 months. "Why are you here?" I asked bluntly. "To talk," Lenora answered. "The whole family. We missed you." I looked at Beckett and Fiona. They were standing behind their parents, clearly feeling awkward. Beckett had grown over the months, getting broader in the shoulders, starting to shave. Fiona had changed her hair, looking older, more serious. "Okay," I opened the gate. "Come on in. We can sit on the veranda." They entered the courtyard, casting curious glances at Sylvia, who deliberately kept some distance, giving us room to talk. "Beautiful garden, Grandpa," Fiona said as we sat down on the veranda. "Better than I remembered." "Thank you." I was touched by this simple compliment. "How was school?" "Good," she shrugged. "I'm in my senior year next year, thinking about colleges." "What about you, Beckett?" I turned to my grandson. "Fine." He was less talkative. "Got accepted to a community college. I'll start in the fall." "Congratulations." I was genuinely proud of him. "What's your major?" "Information technology." He smiled slightly. "Computers, programming, that sort of thing." We exchanged platitudes for a few more minutes, avoiding the main topic. Finally, Lenora cleared her throat. "Dad, we're here because we want to repair our relationship," she said. "What happened? It was terrible, unforgivable. But we're a family, and a family has to stick together." I looked at her, trying to see the sincerity in her eyes, but all I saw was calculation. Lenora had always been bad at hiding her true motives, a trait she'd inherited from me. "Why now?" I asked. "Why 6 months later and not right after I got out of the hospital?" "We were giving you time," Lloyd interjected. "Time to cool down, time to realize." He paused, catching my gaze. "Time to realize that you're the only family I have and I have to forgive you no matter what happens." I finished for him. "Time to realize that without you, I'm alone and miserable." "That's not what we meant," Lenora said quickly. "We just—" "I know what you meant," I interrupted, "and I know why you're here. You found out about the trip Sylvia and I are planning. You were afraid I'd spend money you thought was yours." Lenora turned pale. Lloyd tensed up. Beckett and Fiona looked at each other, clearly not understanding what he was talking about. "How did you—" Lenora began, but I interrupted her again. "How did I know? Bowers is a small town, Lenora. People talk. Sylvia and I have made no secret of our plans." "Are you really going to spend all your savings traveling with her?" Lloyd didn't hide the contempt in his voice. "Not all of it," I answered calmly. "Just some of it. The rest will go to charity and to a trust fund for Beckett and Fiona, with certain conditions, of course." The grandchildren perked up when they heard about the fund. Lenora and Lloyd exchanged quick glances. "What were the conditions?" Lloyd asked, trying to sound casual. "The money can only be used for education," I explained. and only after they've completed at least 2 years of college, with good grades. That's very generous of you, Dad. Lenora put on a smile that didn't reach her eyes. We really appreciate it. I'm not doing this for you, I looked at my grandchildren. I'm doing it for them, so they can have a chance at a better life than their parents had. Lloyd blushed at the obvious insult. Lenora clenched her teeth, but remained silent. What about us? She finally asked. Are you still planning to exclude us from the will? Yes, I answered simply. That decision is final. But we're your family, she exclaimed, losing her temper. Your blood. Family is more than blood, Lenora, I said calmly but firmly. Family is love, respect, caring for each other. When was the last time you showed these qualities to me? She was silent, unable to find an answer. I don't remember, I continued. But I do remember you pushing me down the stairs, how Lloyd threatened to sue me, how you both saw me as nothing but a purse on legs. That's not true, Lenora objected, but without conviction. We cared for you. When? I didn't give up. Give me one example in recent years when you came to me not for money. Silence again. Beckett and Fiona looked awkward, clearly feeling out of place. You see? I turned to my grandchildren. Here's what I want you to understand. Money is a tool, not a goal. It doesn't bring happiness on its own. It's how you use it, who you help, what memories you create. That's a very convenient philosophy for a man who's going to spend it all on entertainment in his old age, Lloyd muttered. Not everything, I corrected him. And not on fun, on life, to fulfill a dream that Esther and I had nurtured for years. With another woman, Lenora added bitterly. You forgot your mother so quickly. That was low, even for her. I felt Sylvia tense beside me, but she remained silent. I'll never forget Esther, I said quietly but forcefully. She was the love of my life, and she was the one who made me promise not to spend the rest of my days alone. To find happiness after her. I'm keeping that promise. Lenora looked away, perhaps for the first time ashamed of her words. Grandfather, Beckett said suddenly, I don't understand what's going on between you and Mom and Dad, but I know I've missed you. I'm sorry I haven't called. Your parents said you didn't want to see us. I looked at my grandson with surprise and gratitude. That's not true, Beckett. I'm always happy to see you and Fiona. Always. Are you? Fiona joined in the conversation too. Mom said you were mad at all of us, that we're not family to you anymore. I am mad at your parents, I admit it. And I have my reasons. But you are my grandchildren. I love you, and I always will, no matter what happens. Lenora and Lloyd looked like they wanted to fall through the ground. Their lies had been exposed, and they had nothing to object to. Can we come to your place? Beckett asked. Without our parents. Just visit. Of course, I smiled at him. My door is always open to you. When are you leaving? Fiona asked, glancing at Sylvia. Traveling? In a month, Sylvia answered, joining the conversation for the first time. But we'll be back in a couple of months. And then we're planning another trip, maybe in the winter. That sounds great. Fiona gave her an uncertain smile. Can we write to you or call? Sure. I was touched by her suggestion. I'd really like that. Lenora stood up, clearly annoyed by the way the conversation was unfolding. We should go, she said dryly. Children, let's go. But we just got here, Beckett objected. I wanted to tell Grandpa about my programming project. Some other time, Lenora cut him off. We still have things to do in town. Beckett and Fiona stood up reluctantly, casting apologetic glances at me. Can we come back next weekend? Beckett asked. Of course, I nodded. Come anytime. Lenora looked like she wanted to say something, but changed her mind. Lloyd just gave me a dry nod and headed for the car. The grandkids hugged me goodbye. The first physical contact in 6 months. When they drove away, Sylvia and I returned to the veranda. I felt a strange mixture of emotions, sadness at the realization of how deep the gap between my daughter and me was, and hope for a restored relationship with my grandchildren. "Are you all right?" Sylvia asked, taking my hand. "Yes," I squeezed her fingers. "I'm just thinking about how strange things have gotten. My own daughter has become almost a stranger, and my grandchildren, whom I barely know, have shown more sincerity in 5 minutes than she has in years." "They're still young," Sylvia observed, "not tainted by greed and resentment. Maybe you'll still have a chance to build a real relationship." "I hope so," I smiled at her. "And I'm glad we have that chance. You and me." She smiled back, and in that moment I realized that no matter what, I was happy. Really happy for the first time in a long time. The month went by quickly. Beckett and Fiona came over every weekend, sometimes together, sometimes separately. We talked, played board games I'd found in the attic, cooked together. They got to know Sylvia, warily at first, then more and more openly. Fiona especially appreciated her book collection and baking recipes. There was no word from Lenora and Lloyd. They didn't visit, didn't call, as if they'd decided to cut me out of their lives completely. It didn't bother me anymore. I had made my decision and was at peace with it. Sylvia and I finalized all our travel arrangements. We bought tickets, booked hotels, made plans to visit the sites. I reread all the guidebooks that Esther had collected and chose the places we absolutely had to see. I also met with Miles and finalized the trust for the grandchildren. The terms were strict but fair. Money for education after 2 years of school with good grades, a small amount after college to settle their lives, and another for their 30th birthday if they demonstrated responsible financial behavior. "Are you sure you don't want to leave something for Lenora?" Miles asked when we were done with the paperwork. "She is your daughter, after all. The only daughter." "I'm sure," I nodded. She made her choice. I made mine. The night before I left, Beckett and Fiona came to say goodbye. They brought a homemade card wishing me a good trip and small souvenirs, a compass keychain from Beckett and a bookmark from Fiona. "So you won't get lost," Beckett explained, pointing to the compass. "And something to mark the pages in your guidebooks with," Fiona added. I was touched by their attention. We spent the evening talking about the countries Sylvia and I were going to visit, the places they wanted to see someday. "Send us pictures," Fiona asked before we left, "and souvenirs." "I will," I promised, "and call if you need anything." "Good luck, Grandpa." Beckett hugged me tighter than usual. "Be careful out there." "I will," I grinned. "I'm not that old, you know." They left, leaving behind a feeling of warmth and hope. Perhaps not all was lost with this generation of the Windley family. The next morning, Sylvia and I loaded our suitcases into a cab and headed for the airport. I looked back at my house, at the manicured garden, at Sylvia's neighboring house. For the first time in a long time, I was leaving Bowers not with sadness, but with anticipation. At the airport, waiting to board, I pulled out an old photograph of Esther that I had always carried with me. It showed her standing on a bridge in Venice, smiling at the camera, happy and full of life. "I'm keeping my promise," I whispered, looking at the photograph. "I am living, Esther. I'm living life to the fullest." Sylvia took my hand, understanding without words what was going on in my soul. I squeezed her fingers gratefully. "Are you ready?" she asked when they announced our landing. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, standing up. We headed to the gate, holding hands, ready for a new adventure, a new chapter of life. I was leaving behind the pain, the hurts, the resentments, the disappointments. Ahead were new cities, new experiences, new memories, and something told me that Esther would approve of my choice.